Okay, folks, welcome back. I have a bone to pick with whoever ate the grilled tenders, because I didn't get any, and I'm a little hungry, but that's okay. Welcome back to our third session, I believe. So we have, for our third session, Elizabeth Oldfield, and she probably is getting a better sense of what she has gotten herself into today. So I'm really excited for this. I first came across Elizabeth and her work by watching an Unheard video. There were two of them, one you did with John, and then one you did with Alex O'Connor, I believe. And I loved it. It really immediately felt like a kind of, I know we can't use this phrase, but a fellow traveler. I don't mean it in that 1950s sort of way, but in this little corner sort of way. Fellow travelers. So she has a book, Fully Alive, Tending to the Soul in Turbulent Times. And of course, if you've been in this corner for a bit, you know that that word tending and attending is very much sort of part of what we talk a great deal about. And I'm sure this is a reference to the Irenaeus quote, "The glory of God is man fully alive in Christ Jesus." So I love this notion of being fully alive. So without further ado, Elizabeth, please come on up.
Thank you, Kel. Thank you so much for having me. What joy to be here. I'm going to start with my single slide. I'm not really a slide person, but this quote comes up a lot. I thought it might be helpful for visual learners to have it on the screen. We seek an enlargement of our being. We want to be more than ourselves. We want to see with other eyes, to imagine with other imaginations, to feel with other hearts as well as our own. The primary impulse of each is to maintain and aggrandize himself. The secondary impulse is to go out of the self, to correct its provincialism and heal its loneliness. And I should be clear in that first one. The primary impulse of each is to maintain and aggrandize himself or herself. So, I am going to try and say three reasonably simple things. What do we long for? What gets in the way? And what helps. And that second part of the quote is what we're going to come back to again and again. These two impulses in us. That first one, which keeps us locked up, and the second one, which is what allows us to seek that enlargement of the self that is healthy and humanizing. And I care so much about the theme of this conference, but I got a little bit tripped up by that word fellowship. I don't know if, and I know some of you have been around church cultures, all of us will have complicated history with that if we have, but in the places I've been, the word fellowship has been entirely semiotically evacuated. It's just dead, right? Stay afterwards for coffee and fellowship means stand in the same physical space and make barely honest pleasantries holding caffeine. And I'm really bad at that, really, really bad. I am allergic to small talk. I ask super intense questions. People aren't ready for them. I can see the eyes doing this. Makes everything socially awkward. It's fine. I'm hoping here you can cope with my intense questions, and that maybe through these 2 days we can rescue the word fellowship for me. But I think something I do care deeply about, although I might not always use that language, is relationship. Is relationality or communion or connection or interdependence. We have so many linguistic attempts to gesture towards it because, like many of the big, deep, good, true, beautiful things, language can't really get there. It's beyond language. But my working definition of what it means to be fully alive and fully human is living not as individuals trapped in what David Foster Wallace calls our tiny skull-sized kingdoms, but living fully into these relationships, this irreconcilable interdependence. And I think that goes in several directions. That first, I need deep connection and relationship with my own soul, to not be numbing or distracting or running from the longings deep within me. And if you get tripped up by the soul language, you can use deep self, maybe. Then with this extraordinary creation, this home of ours, which is not some lifeless ball of resources which we can asset strip with impunity, but an enchanted habitat given to us as a gift. And yes, maybe most importantly, deep connection beyond me with the divine, with capital L love. I'm a Christian, but in my book, I write the word God in square brackets through most of the text to acknowledge that that is perhaps the most semiotically dense 3 letters in our language, that it is dragging burdens of baggage and associations with it. Right, so today I'm going to say divine in the hope that I can invite as many of you as possible to go on this journey with me. But if you are allergic to it or indeed annoyed that I'm not using God, that's fine too, because this is a space where we can tolerate those things, I think. So I believe, yes, we are made for love, we are made for the divine, that we are made, I'm just going to use it, made by God and for God, and almost as much, and this is the bit you don't necessarily need to believe this level for, we are made ongoingly by each other, and we are made for each other. We are continually shaping and forming each other for better or worse, and we are not fully human alone. And I had an intuitive sense of this long before I could articulate a Trinitarian anthropology. It seemed obvious to me that we are somehow entangled down to our very bodies. And I loved singing together. There's something incredibly powerful about singing together, right? Because it acknowledges a key part of human reality. Listen to this from Adam Smith's theory of moral sentiments. The mob, when they are gazing at a dancer on the slack rope, I think this is a circus. So imagine a circus. We're the mob, gazing at a dancer on the slack rope. We naturally writhe and twist and balance our own bodies as we see the dancer do, and as they feel that they themselves must do if in his situation. Persons of delicate fibers and a weak constitution, I think that's code for women, complain that in looking on the sores and ulcers which are exposed by beggars in the streets, they are apt to feel an itching or uneasy sensation in the correspondent part of their own bodies. Even men of the most robust make. Observe, I put the even in, it's not in there, but it felt tonally like you needed the even. Even men! Observe that in looking upon sore eyes, they often feel a very sensible soreness in their own. And Maurice Merleau-Ponty calls something like this intercorporeality. And he said this: each of us is pregnant with the others. And I love that word. Most kind of multi-syllabic words like that, I'm like, is it really necessary? But intercorporeality, I love all 3 parts of it. Inter, between or among, corporeal. I feel most acutely in these times, particularly with AI, a sense that we must remain embodied, remain attuned to our incarnate reality. And reality. The reality is our bodies are interconnected. Neuroscientist Vittorio Gallesi calls something like this we space. He talks about virtually participating in another person's body. But this all came later, this kind of backfilling of theory around interpersonal neurobiology or intercorporeality. I'm always super aware of John's in the room here, so he can come and correct me if I'm completely destroying these concepts. All of that theory, all of the ways, what I'm trying to get at is that so many different disciplines are now gesturing, seeking language to describe this deep relational reality. Across the sciences, across the humanities, always across theology, across the arts. It's like we're trying to talk ourselves back into something we've already known, right? We need these fancy, intelligent-sounding concepts to persuade us to trust the thing that we are living before we got trained out of it by the atomizing, individualizing stories of modernity. So I no longer believe in individuals. I think individualism is an intensely left hemispheric way of understanding ourselves, and we need left hemispheric approaches. Some of you will be very familiar with Ian McGilchrist, some of you won't ever have heard of him, but I can't do a whole explanation now, we'll talk about it later. But we need left hemispheric approaches, one of the functions of which is to take things apart, to see how they work, right? That's really important. We have learned so much, so many of our advances. The reason I haven't died in childbirth, right, is due to that approach, so I do not want to denigrate it. And McGilchrist would argue the right hemispheric way of attending to the world, which puts things back together, which sees the connections with things, which seeks to see the whole, is a more effective way of staying rooted in reality. And so I think the reality is that humans are not separate individuals, but persons in relationship, beings in communion. And this vision is not quite the same as oneness. You may be here with a kind of different perspective. I have really good Buddhist friends and Taoist friends, and we talk about the fact that their vision of oneness is something slightly different to what I intuitively understand by this idea of the relationality of reality. As Paul was speaking earlier, that kind of think as one, act as one, racially homogenous mass that was a kind of fact of Japanese culture before the Second World War massively freaks me out. That sounds sinister to me. I believe in order to have relationship, you need otherness. That these two things are often framed as separate, and they are not. If you have underlying sameness, you don't need relationship. So the otherness, the difference, is part of where that relational aliveness is, whether between humans or with humans and the divine. And it is precisely in being in relationship with otherness and difference that we come alive. As Lewis says, it corrects our parochialism. It opens up the world. It helps us actually connect with reality, and it can heal our loneliness. I don't actually want to merge with others, although I think that first impulse, as we'll unpack, that he's talking about, is the bit of me that's seeking sameness. Confirm me. But that's not what aliveness is. That merging and sameness can actually be death. What we long for is to be different, but to know and be known, to see and be seen. And Martin Buber calls this process, or this posture is probably better, I, thou. When we stop seeing the humans around us really as sort of set dressing, functional ways to get our needs met, but as whole, complex, changing, living persons, and we are able to say thou to them, or perhaps in modern parlance, hello you. Has anyone said hello you to you? It's kind of intimate, isn't it? Like if a stranger said it to you, you'd be a bit like, ooh. It has echoes of the vous tu distinction that we still have in French and that most languages had originally. I found out a while ago that Quakers for a very long time still said thee or thou, long after most English speakers had dropped it, because they wanted to keep acknowledging the equality of persons, the intimacy of persons, that addressing God as thou was like saying hello you to God. And that I-thou moments, that hallow you, that dropping away of the instrumentalizing gaze to really see someone is the good stuff, right? Intimacy is the label that we call it, but again, that doesn't have the power that I'm looking for. Buber says all living is meeting, and that these moments between us are all that are really real. And if we don't have them, if we stay in that first impulse that Lewis speaks of, maintaining and aggrandizing our tiny skull-sized kingdoms, we never really live. This is what I think we long for. To go out of the self into the really real of communion with the other. And that's what I'm interested in. I assume if you're here, you're at least slightly interested in it, at least in theory as well. And when we're able to live towards it, to see and be seen undefended, to know and be known as we are, and not be rejected but welcomed, we come home. So we long for it, I think. But my second point is what gets in the way. Because is it just me, or is that really hard to find? The we space, the I, thou, is often, frankly, terrifying and difficult to navigate. Our tiny skull-sized kingdoms where we are in control feel so much safer. And I really know this first impulse to maintain and aggrandize myself. But it's scary through Lewis, through lots of other sources when I started paying attention to it in myself, just how deep it goes. Let me say, it's incredibly easy to spot in other people. It's really fun to spot it in other people, especially your spouse. But it doesn't get us very far, spotting it in other people. If we actually want to change, if we actually want to be people who can live in that second impulse, we need to start spotting it in ourselves. And so I'm going to offer you 2 frames that I find helpful. One is psychological. Political theorist Dr. Sarah Stein-Librano has done amazing work on how the desire to be able to think of ourselves as right and as good people drives so much of our social and political cultures. And she's got a book called Don't Talk About Politics and What to Do Instead, in which she goes really deep into the social psychology behind why so much political discussion and so-called debate is pretty pointless. No one learns anything. The only good of it is that you get a little dopamine treat from hearing someone say something that you agree with. Ah, yes, I'm right. That's literally what's going on. And if there is enough conflict in that debate, everyone actually gets hardened into their pre-existing positions. There's almost no evidence that debate is effective in changing anyone's minds ever. So see it as a blood sport, if you like. Enjoy it on that level. It's not adding anything to our common life. Because what happens is that desire to maintain and aggrandize a sense of self makes us put up a fight against anything that threatens the story that we tell about ourselves. We actually build stronger walls against difference and disagreement. And you may well all know much more than me about cognitive biases, these psychological hoops that we jump through, and so many of them are driven by this impulse in us to maintain a story of ourselves that we are right and good. And I'm sure you've seen the studies showing that all people, and this is the annoying bit because I imagine most of us in this room have this in our aspirational story of ourselves, intelligent people will seek and select and focus on evidence which backs up our pre-existing positions, and be almost oblivious to facts and evidence which threaten those beliefs, particularly around things that affect our identity, and politics and religion are key in that. Humans, and I wish this was not true of me, but it is, have this amazing ability to confabulate self-justificatory stories about how we've made the right decision and why our position is clearly morally spotless. And I could give you a really big example of this, something juicy, but it's too early. You've only just met me, and whatever I say, I might create distance. So I'm going to give you a small example that I hope I'm not the only one who has experienced this. This is a very, very small thing, but about a few months ago, I was talking to a friend. I said, where are you going on holiday? And she said, oh, we're going to go to Greece because it always rains in the UK in the summer. And we couldn't afford to go to Greece. And also, I thought, I don't want to do that. I was like, we're going to stay in the UK. We're going to have a holiday in the UK. And it happened that we had the week where it was really, really, really sunny in the UK. And it was horrible in Greece. The laugh makes me think you felt this, right? And I noticed it in myself because I'm thinking deeply about these things. I was like, oh, I'm a terrible person. Why? I didn't want her to have a horrible holiday. It's not Schadenfreude in that sense that I actually really don't think the pleasure is about them suffering. The pleasure is being right. Yeah? Yeah, called it, yeah. I got it. It's a really strong reward mechanism in us. I also coach individuals, and we will defend beliefs, even ones that are not serving us, even ones that are really quite negative about ourselves, and go looking for evidence to reinforce them, because changing our minds is destabilizing, and we really like being right. And I live in a community house, a small intentional community. I can talk to you more about it if you like. But let me tell you, living with other adults, I live with my husband and 2 kids and 3 other adults in a monastic-inspired intentional community. And it is incredibly uncomfortable because that impulse in me to maintain and aggrandize myself, to keep telling a story of myself that is right and good, is continually being forced to the surface. When you're in a romantic relationship, you can there's only 2 of you, so you can sort of maybe buy the lie that actually they are usually wrong, and I am usually right. You can get away with that for a long time in a marriage. not when there's 5 other adults and 5 different perspectives up close. I am having to come face to face with the fact that I really don't like admitting I was wrong. I've always got a really good reason why I didn't do something, and it's not that I was lazy, I was busy, or whatever it is. When I was thoughtless, there's a strong justification for it, in a way that just isn't when they're thoughtless, right, or lazy, or forget something. That first impulse is so alive in us, it's so alive in me. But community requires the second. It requires me, if I'm going to have actual covenant-connected relationships with my housemates, to internalize the fact that I am not always good and I am not always right. And so I'm trying to pay attention to this first impulse, right? This defensive position that I go into when I encounter another person. Maybe it's a housemate or a neighbor or some of the refugees. We've got lots and lots of refugees in our church in the UK. Maybe it's another speaker here. Maybe it's one of you and you say something and you have come to a different perspective than me on something big. The natural place we go is Lewis's first impulse. It is true of almost everyone, at least the research indicates that it is. That when we encounter that different perspective on the world, that disagreement, we get a little, sometimes large actually, depending on our background, depending on our history, depending on our temperament and our bodies, threat response. We get a little kick of fight, flight, freeze. And my first impulse, because this is what the fight bit of fight, flight, freeze does, is to figure out why I'm right and they're wrong. Not to listen with empathy and curiosity, but to maintain and aggrandize myself, especially if I have reason to believe that they are not like me, or at a deeper level, what's really going on there is if I think they might not like me, if you see what I mean. This deep hunger to see and be seen, to know and be known. If I sense I'm going to get the opposite, I will very quickly pull away. And one of the things at work in these encounters is often known as homophily in the literature. I call it people like me syndrome. Homophily just means love of the same. And there's a lot of research that indicates that because we're ridiculous humans, that we go around the world like Narcissus, scanning for fragments of our own reflection. We really like other people being as much like ourselves as they can possibly be. And this isn't just there's some bad people who do this. This is really very deep in us. When we fall in love, it's often because we found a commonality. When we make friends, it's often because they remind us of ourselves in some way. And I've been feeling it this morning, walking around, being aware that there's fewer women in the room. And I don't know if you've seen me do this, it's ridiculous. Hands up, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing about human beings. But because there's more men in the room than women in the room, and I'm a woman, when I spot a woman, I'm like, hi. That's homophily, right? If you see someone with the same glasses, you might be like, hi, yeah, you seem like a good person. Begin to notice the ridiculous, I feel more comfortable around tall people. If you're abroad and you meet someone who comes from your hometown, how do you feel? Warm towards them, right? Do you like everyone in your hometown? No, it's arbitrary. So much of this is entirely arbitrary. It's people like me syndrome. It's part of who we are, and we don't need to unnecessarily demonize it. And sometimes it really work for us, right? Sometimes we really need it. It's all right to want to be around people who like the same music as you. It's all right to have men-only groups and women-only groups, and it's not necessarily a problem. But it can, when it's working in conjunction with this primary impulse, it can keep us locked up in our tiny skull-sized kingdoms. It can stop us from correcting our parochialism by going out from the self into difference, into that relational aliveness in the in-between. I had a moment yesterday with Kale. Kale and I met yesterday, or maybe Wednesday. I don't know anything about Kale. We got in the back of a car together on the way to the ball game, and we were doing that thing when you meet someone new, that homophily is really at play. You're like, are you enemy, friend, you know? Well, what's the status hierarchy here? Do you like me? Do I like you? How much can I relax? And very quickly, very early on, it became clear that Kale and I have the same annoying dietary restriction. And then we were off, right? I've known this man for 2 days, but he's lovely. He is a lovely man. And I think probably as the 2 days go on, Kel and I will find that we've come to some really different conclusions on things, right? Things will come up where we're really far apart, I imagine. I imagine that's true of almost every dyad you could get in the room. But I'm going to guess Kel and I will share a lot in common, and we'll have a lot that's different. But because we've already had this people like me connection, bring it on. Great. No problem. It's Kale. He's become a whole human person to me, and I can be in relaxed relationship around difference without going into my threat reaction, right? Without beginning to dehumanize him or label him or run away from him. I can stay in the we space. And this is this practice and posture we can train ourselves into as we become more aware, as we attend to it in ourselves. I have been trying for many years. I launched a podcast in 2017 called The Sacred, and I speak to people from wildly different tribes and perspectives, from all over the political compass, every kind of metaphysical and spiritual belief that you might think of. And it is a practice for me now to just listen and to feel myself do this when they say something I disagree with, to feel myself try and maintain and aggrandize my sense of self when I encounter otherness, and stay in the conversation as the threat response wears off and they transform into a complicated, fragile human person before my very eyes. I now love it. There is an intensely pleasurable sensation of learning something new about the world, of having my horizons expanded, my parochialism, of which I have a lot, corrected. It is less immediate, it's less of a sugar rush than the dopamine treat of being confirmed in our beliefs. It's a bit like the difference between a packet of Haribo and a really delicious meal. And I think it's that second impulse, that relational connection with otherness that we long for. I long for it. I long for communion and connection. And I don't want to be wrong, and I don't want to be vulnerable, and I want to be in control. And when I think about the fellowship of the Spirit, it's that push-pull that I think about. How hard it is and how much help I need to pursue it. So that's a psychological frame for thinking about some of these things. There's another language for thinking about these first and second impulses in us, and it's a theological one. Francis Bufford, who's professor of creative writing at Goldsmiths, calls it the human propensity to F things up. I'm not going to swear because it's culturally very different here. But I want you to imagine it. I actually do want you to imagine that word because it sounds brutal. There's a fricative and plosive in that F word that helps us get to the fracture. And HBT-FTU, or the human propensity to F things up, is Bufford's attempt to rebrand the concept of sin. And the word sin is not fashionable, at least where I'm from, right? I live in a very hipster part of London. I'm surrounded by anarchists and polyamorous communes and art students, and I love them. But the word sin for them is one of two things. It's either kind of, sounds kind of nice actually, right? Cream cakes and calories and naughtiness. Or it sounds terrifying. A kosh that someone is going to beat them with, right? Externally imposed, psychologically crippling guilt. And you will all have your own stories with that word. I understand why people are nervous about it. But it helps me, because I think at least one strand in my tradition is an understanding of sin as about relational disconnection, about the bit of us that wants to resist the interdependence that is the reality of humanity, in favor of the lie of separation. It's tragedy. Kant called it the crooked timber of humanity, the tendency to break things, to break relationships, to break connection. Augustine and later Luther used the phrase homo incurvatus in se, humanity turned in on itself, something designed to grow outwards, instead turning in like an ingrowing toenail. Homo incurvatus in se, the human propensity to F things up, sin. Whatever language you can get hold of, I think it's helpful. When we live by Lewis's first impulse to maintain and aggrandize ourselves, when we are continually trying to shore up our stories of being good people and right people and not like those other guys, we are slowly turning in on ourselves and shrinking. And I find this understanding of the word sin prone to disconnection, made for connection, prone to disconnection, in need of help to move outwards into fully aliveness. A label that's not psychologically crushing, but liberating. A bit of a relief, actually, to recognize something in myself. And when we can understand dynamics in our own souls or our own selves, it opens up the possibility of change. And in my book, Fully Alive, I go through the 7 deadly sins. Again, weird thing to be trying to do in my culture, but it seems to be remarkably connecting. I think there's a moment now for this language. And I go through all 7 of them and look at how this tendency to disconnection, this relational turning in, shows up in our lives. And I won't go through them all, but perhaps the most relevant 2 here as we go through these 2 days, and we're trying to have conversations about big, deep things in your estuary groups and on the panel, is what I call wrath. I think it's wrath here, wrath. By the way, this is not the sort of legit church fathers definition of wrath. I'm looking for Jonathan to just disclaimer. But I think about it as really what's driving the polarization and the tribalism and the sorting of people into ever smaller groups of people like me. People who will reflect back my own reassuring image to me, rather than invite me into the discomfort of otherness. The story that we tell, and we tell it in all our tribes, is actually righteous to pull back into ourselves. Right? It's actually righteous to dehumanize the other who disagrees with us. That, for me, is wrath, and at least in myself, I'm trying to be really unsparing at calling it sin, at noticing it as a soul danger in myself. And the other way I think about this relational disconnecting impulse that might be relevant here is envy. And in my chapter on envy, I basically look at status anxiety. At all the tiny calculations we make about who is more or less worthy than us. And Alan de Botton's written an amazing book on this called Status Anxiety, which I would highly recommend. We have this kind of continual desire to maintain our sense of self. And it's a bit embarrassing. Have you ever seen the way dogs go around sniffing each other's bottoms to work out where they sit in the pack hierarchy? Humans do it too. I'm going to be watching you across the room. I'm not sniffing anyone's bum, I promise. I'm really not. Sorry. But we do. When we meet someone, right? Where do we sit? Do I need to be slightly deferential to you? Or can I actually be slightly patronizing of you? I'm not saying this is conscious. Probably all you're much better people than me. But this, am I okay in this space? Where do I sit in this group? Who's in charge here? This very fleshly, natural, deeply unlovely impulse plays out in all kinds of things, in all kinds of places. And again, it's about maintaining and aggrandizing the story of ourselves. It stops us seeing each other not as someone above us or below us, but someone eye to eye, face to face, who we might be able to really encounter as a you. And obviously pride, the big cheese, maybe the meta concept for when I think about this. It's the bit of us that knows communion and community and intimacy and encounter with divine love, maybe perhaps especially, is going to require us to put down our arms. To go from that to this. To surrender control, to unclench our hands. Admit our weaknesses and our foolishness and our longings. And ask for help. And so finally, what helps? I think this is a room in which not much, at least, of what I've said about our longings will be controversial, and that's really nice, because I have to persuade a lot of people about the irreconcilable relationality of reality. I think most of you would be on board with this idea that humans are made for relationships, and most of you will have some lived experience about the fact that it's hard. There will be broken marriages in this room. There will be bitterly ended friendships. There will be family relationships where there's estrangement, right? This stuff is so real and we long for it and has the most powerful capacity to hurt us. And you can call that You can call those impulses in us sin, and I mean that not in a condemnatory way. You can call it, some cognitive bug, psychological bias. But this desire to turn outwards and the difficulty with it is what I think I want to spend my life figuring out. I want to grow outwards. I don't want to turn inwards and shrink. And that means admitting that I am not always, and perhaps only rarely, right. Even saying that is annoying. I don't really believe it, honestly. I think I'm mainly right. I'm working on it. That I am not a good person. That I don't know most of the time what I'm doing, but that I long. And I'm just going to finish in these last few minutes with 3 things that I think I have found help me in this journey. And the first is trying to find a stable sense of self that is not rooted in the need to be right and good. And we can think of these as kind of concentric circles. We do need to start here. And I find my Christian faith really helps with this. It's kind of a given. If you want to get involved in that whole vibe, you got to let go of the need to be right and good. That's not where this stuff starts. I have friends who find contemplative practice of other kinds, meditation, therapy, wherever you go for it, coming to an awareness of this posture in you and slowly letting go of it and finding somewhere else to stand is absolutely vital. I am still rubbish at this, and I've been doing it sort of professionally for 8 years. But when I find myself able to go out from myself, it's because I have, at least momentarily, fully believed that no, I'm not right or good, but I am loved anyway. That I am beloved. That I am seen and known. That I don't need to desperately be trying to get that from another human being, like a hungry ghost. Because I have enough of it from somewhere else that I can offer it as a gift. I think finding a stable sense of self, the metaphor I find really helpful is deep roots and wide branches. We don't need to let go of our beliefs, our particularity, our positions, our community. This is not become some relativist slop. Encounter with the other does not require sameness. I want you to really hear that. We can have deeply rooted particularity and open arms of hospitality when we have a stable sense of self. The second thing is the practice of intimate relationships as if they are the central activity of life, because they are. When you die, at your funeral, frankly, no one's going to care about your job. No one's going to care if you were stylish or hot or thin, really, really well-designed kitchen that was on Pinterest, or you went on loads of fancy holidays. The stuff just doesn't show up in eulogy. The stuff that we are continually being told by the media to care about is actively pointless distraction. The stuff that lasts when you die is the relational imprint you left on others. Who did you love and who loved you? Who saw you and who did you really see? And it's hard, as we've said. But when we say that is what I want my life to be about and everything else, although it's important, can take second place, we're more likely to be able to do this, to let go of the primary impulse and move into the second. And the third thing is being part of challenging communities. And this is one of those. I originally wrote diverse communities, but I think you'd agree that word diverse, a bit like the word God, now has some complex associations. What I mean by challenging communities is being up close in our bodies, ideally, regularly, with people who are not just fulfilling our homophily, people who are not just reminding us of ourselves, and that can be a spectrum of perspectives, backgrounds, theological positions. Places like this are amazing for building that muscle. Healthy congregations are amazing for building that muscle. Local civic groups where you're working with people across those kind of differences are amazing for building that muscles, and we've got less and less good at it because we're letting this first impulse rule and we're being told that that is righteous. So tolerating the discomfort of the reality of other people, the way they threaten and destabilize and inconvenience and generally piss us off. Is that Just me? Other people? Super annoying, right? Not you. Not you guys. It's really a muscle. I mean, you could call it a neural pathway, you could call it spiritual formation. It's all of those things. Being the kind of person who can show up, sign up to the rota, have the honest and painful conversation with Bob about his inappropriate behavior, and then when you're Bob or Barbara, and someone has an honest and painful conversation with you about your challenging behavior, not storming out of there, right? Staying with the tension, staying with the difficulty, staying, if at all possible, in connection with someone who is challenging you. It's a muscle we can build. It is, I think, essential for the good of our souls if we ever want to do this thing that Lewis is calling us, and it is essential for our common life. And we need scaffolding for it. I moved into an actual commune because I knew I'm not very good at it and I needed to lock myself in. This is what marriage vows are for, right? What are the equivalent of marriage vows for your friendships, for your communities? I have seen glimpses of it, I think, in these estuary groups. The Chicago group that have put this on together have committed to each other, right? They've taken some risks. Some of them have risked a bunch of money. Do you know that's the root of the word fellow in Norse? People who have invested in the same project. People who are sharing the risk of something. Go share the risk of something with other people. Lock yourself in as far as possible, not in an authoritarian, scary way. Just in like, pay your choir membership for a year in advance, or whatever it is, to encourage you to go. Give yourself the help so that when the first impulse kicks in, you have enough time to let it wear off. And go, do I want to maintain and aggrandize my sense of self for the rest of my life? Doesn't sound that fun. Life, an adventure. And the potential of healing our loneliness is out from the self. And this is the end of that Lewis quote. So he's talking about an enlargement of our being, and then these first and second impulses, and he says, obviously this process can be described as an enlargement or as a temporary annihilation of the self. That's why it's scary. But that is an old paradox. He that loseth his life, she that loses her life, shall save it. When we allow ourselves to relax our white-knuckled grip on the false story we have been telling about ourselves, and we can surrender to the relational, interconnected fellowship of the Spirit, which is the deep, really real underneath everything else, we might just be fully human and fully alive. Thank you very much.